Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. And this video is a post-cohort video. So while this is targeted towards my recently graduated cohort, SCIR Sasquatch, the advice here can apply to any bootcamp graduate. And basically the idea is this: you've just completed your bootcamp and you're thinking, now what do I do, right? Because basically, your skills as a developer are always something you got to keep on working on. Okay, it's just basically it's like maintaining muscle mass or literally anything is just a constant journey. But on top of it, you have this whole other journey of seeking your first role. Okay, now I'm going to be assuming that you've gone through a web development bootcamp. And so in that regard, generally that's going to be the low-hanging fruit. So applying for, let's say, game developer jobs or data engineer jobs when you went through a web development bootcamp, well, those are potential pivots later on in your career if you'd like. I would focus on what you specifically were just trained in. So that's sort of like first thing to think about. But again, there's a whole wide world of jobs you can apply for within that realm. I mean, of course, there's back-end developer, front-end developer, and full-stack developer. But then there's also roles that kind of go in that sphere that you can also apply for, such as developer advocate, sales engineer. There's an actual email developer where you're focusing on just making templates for HTML with HTML CSS for marketing emails. There's DevRel, which is very similar to developer advocate, which again, that role is more of taking your knowledge of coding and helping basically communicate the benefits of a particular product to other developers, which takes a developer to talk to developers. And really requires you to also be comfortable writing and talking, because it oftentimes requires you to go on podcasts, create tutorials, write blogs, things like that. But if you're someone with a marketing background and now you have this development background, that's that makes you a very strong candidate for such a role. There's QA, quality assurance, which is you're gonna be focusing on writing tests for code. So the whole point is there's a lot of realms. So don't pigeonhole to just one job title, not just front-end dev or back-end dev. Take a look at all sort of the types of roles. And again, if you feel like it's something you can learn, apply for the job. Don't get too hung up on the job description. If it's something that you think you have a basis to work to. Because bottom line is most job ads are asking for a unicorn, people with 5 years experience and things that haven't even existed for 5 years. But bottom line is they're probably not going to hire a unicorn because they don't exist. But if you apply, they might determine that you're the sturdy horse that they need. So bottom line is, you see a job that you're interested in, apply. But there are strategies that you can take to help you stand out in the application process and also have more success. So what a lot of people do is they'll have a resume, a cover letter that kind of talks about who they are, and then they'll point them towards their portfolio website. Problem is, you haven't really, if I'm the potential employer, you haven't curated my experience of how I'm going to come up to my impression of you. And that's what you got to think about it. You got to think about it when you go, if you watch any commercial on TV, they don't try to leave it up in the air of what opinion you're going to walk away. Those commercials are geared towards making sure that when you are done with the commercial, that you have a particular opinion. That's what you got to think about your resume, your cover letter, and any additional supplemental materials you include. That the idea is that you're trying to craft a journey for the person who reads your resume and your cover letter to get to a particular conclusion. So everything should be framed with that in mind. You should always be asking yourself, if I'm reading this, am I getting where I want them to get to? Okay. And that'll help you determine what stuff is extra and unnecessary, what stuff should be reworded. Okay, but the idea is that you're trying to get them to a point of view is yes. And how can you do that? One idea is a portfolio letter that's on top of your cover letter. The idea being that you don't just tell them to go look at your portfolio and then take a look at a random project and come up with random conclusions. You write a one-pager that says these are the projects in my portfolio that they may or may not look at, but with a summary of what technologies you're using in each one, and sort of what does this illustrate that you know. Okay, so just because you built a to-do list, what am I supposed to know that you know from building that to-do list? Okay, so crafting this curated experience of your application is going to help people come up much quicker to a good impression or the impression that you want. So always think about that when you're crafting your resume. 2, don't just depend on your application. Okay, one thing I'm a big, huge advocate of is everybody starting a podcast, starting a blog, doing YouTube videos about the thing they're looking for a job in. Okay, the reason being is that it's an easy way to demonstrate that you have an expertise and a passion for the thing that you're looking to work in. Okay, I mean, that's going to definitely give you a leg up because people can then experience you before the interview and come up with an impression before the interview. So your interview isn't going to be the thing that your entire impression depends upon. Okay, so you can go out there and put quality content out there showing your expertise at your most comfortable. Okay, because you can take multiple takes. And then on the interview, if you're not perfect, if you are a little nervous the day of the interview, they'll know that, hey, that's not you all the time. I've read your blogs, I've seen your videos, I listened to your podcast. I know you feel very comfortable communicating about these things. Or I've listened to your podcast for some time and I've seen how you've evolved communicating these things. And that helps. So again, sometimes creating content isn't just to build an audience. I mean, if you build an audience, that's great. And that has other benefits. But oftentimes just having that content out there just allows there to be breadcrumbs for building the impressions you need when you need them. Okay, they become reference points when you need to refer to people saying, hey, like, I have talked about this before. I do know about this. I'm not just telling you because that's what you want to hear. I have these things that I can point to show that these are things that I'm interested in. Cool. So that's tips that I would say on the job hunt front. Okay, the idea just a way of kind of one standing out. And one, it's also going to just improve your ability to communicate and also help you just think a little bit more clear about what you're trying to do. But now on the improving your skills part, okay, so again, focusing on the world of web development, generally, one of the things you want to do is make sure that your foundation, and I would say particularly in JavaScript, should be solid. Like, again, your foundation in other languages will improve as your foundation in other languages improve. Okay, so my thing would just be to go back, read like the MDN documentation in JavaScript. If you haven't gone through like that very initial free Bootcamp course, go through that. These are just going to be things that are just going to reinforce those fundamentals. Because the more you understand how JavaScript fundamentally works, the more things like Express and React and all these things, just like what they're doing makes more sense. And it's not like, it doesn't become no longer an Express thing. It doesn't become no longer a React thing. It becomes just sort of like, okay, this is a front-end thing. And the concepts that you learn when you're doing React then become really translatable when you're doing Vue, Svelte, Solid. Same thing with an Express. You get really comfortable with Express, then you can apply those same concepts to Koa, Ruby on Rails, Laravel, Django, etc. Like it, sort of like what are the pieces you're grabbing for and why you're grabbing for them. It's not just because this framework tells me I have to do it this way, which is going to give you a much deeper understanding. Which is generally why eventually, I do think it's good to build small projects in many frameworks. A lot of people say, okay, just focus on one, become master of one. There should definitely be sort of one language, maybe a particular set of tools that you really focus on becoming really strong in and doing more advanced projects in. But I generally try to build a to-do list in as many technologies as I can, just a basic to-do list. The reason being is that if building the same thing over and over again, what's highlighted is the difference in the workflow between technologies. So if I build a to-do list API in Express and then build it again in Koa in JavaScript, I'm going to really notice sort of like the nuances and the differences in doing the same exact thing. Okay, so I'm no longer thinking about what I'm doing. I'm just appreciating the differences in how you do it. A problem a lot of people make is they try to build a different thing in every technology that they try to learn. So then you have no reference point. So it's hard for you to compare what you learned in one to another because you're building completely different things, and it's hard to see the patterns. So you always have to ask yourself, like, why am I doing something? Are you doing it to learn? Then keep the project simple, okay? And keep the amount of new things you're doing minimal, okay? So if you're building another to-do list, like let's say you build your initial to-do list in Express, wonderful. Then you build another to-do list because you want to learn something else. Like let's say you want to learn how to use Redis for caching purposes. Then just do that. Build the same exact to-do list, just incorporate Redis. Okay? Don't try to build something completely different because then you're just adding more complexity, which muddles the takeaways because now it's not just one thing that's different. There's other things that are different. So when you try to learn, you're not sure, like, is the things that I'm learning have to do with these changes or these changes? So again, the idea is for learning projects, always kind of redo things you've done before with either different technology or a more advanced implementation. So in that case, if you're using no new technologies and you're building that to-do list again, maybe add more features like having it like categories of lists and multiple lists and things like that. But the idea is always like do minor sort of increments. And that's generally like my learning strategy, building the same things over and over again. I built many to-do lists, but that's different than building a project for your portfolio. So if I'm building a showpiece, like a portfolio piece, then I'm going to use the technologies I'm strongest in because I want to build an app with sort of like the best functionality, and then I'll go do research on like best practices with those technologies. So point being is that don't think that a showpiece project is the same thing as a learning project. A lot of people try to do it all in one. I want to build something fancy and learn a bunch of stuff. That's generally not going to how it works. Building something complicated, it's hard to learn when you're doing something complicated because there's too many moving pieces. Now, you can learn a lot easier from doing something simple, but oftentimes it's not the most showy thing in the world. So just kind of determine like what is that you're trying to do. And also now about time management coming out of bootcamp, whatever time you were spending in your bootcamp, it should be the time you continue to spend. So if you were doing sort of a day course where you were working Monday through Friday for 8 hours a day, continue allocating that time towards 50-50 towards improving your skills and applying for jobs, which means writing those resumes, creating that curated experience. Okay, which includes networking, so going to like meetups and events and just like connecting with people on LinkedIn. And then again, you'll also do a lot of networking by just like participating on Twitter and putting out content. Like you'll actually like connect with people. So that serves the double whammy. And then 50% that, and then 50%, doing learning projects and showpiece projects and allocating that time efficiently and doing coding challenges, just the practice sort of your algorithmic thinking and problem solving, where you're not trying to build a whole application, you're just trying to create a function that, given certain arguments, returns certain values, and how would I think through the steps of doing that. So, and I would do that at Code Wars, and I would start with level 8 kata. Okay, a lot of people, they rush to try to do the hard kata, which is like 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 being the hardest. I find sometimes I learn a lot more just by doing a lot of really easy level 8 and 7 kata, because again, I'm focusing more on the thinking and less on like syntax and things like that. So I can really kind of focus on just developing my algorithmic thinking and how to break down a problem. And then again, as that develops, then you do harder problems, because the point of harder problems is to demonstrate what you've learned. It's the basics, it's the easy exercises, it's the repetitive things that are going to actually help you build the skill. So just keep that in mind. But so again, time management, don't change your schedule. So whatever time you were allocating before towards the course, whether it's in the evenings or during the day, keep allocating that time. Again, split it between job hunt and skill development. And again, create content that'll help you. One, it'll help you learn, it'll help you network, and it'll help you stand out in the job application process. So create content. There can never be enough content. And on that, and just to kind of give you an example, you'll probably notice that when you Google tutorials for different things, you oftentimes find outdated tutorials because technology gets outdated quickly. So that's why there's always a demand for more content, okay? Because the tutorial that was written 3 months ago might no longer be relevant. So people will be welcoming of your podcast, of your video, of your blog, okay? And nowadays it's really easy. Head over to WordPress.com. Actually, even better, go to dev.to and start a Markdown blog, okay? Again, free. It's perfect because the audience at dev.to is developers. You can start a podcast with anchor.fm for free that's automatically distributed to Spotify, iTunes, wherever. And YouTube is pretty accessible. So bottom line is like being able to distribute content is easy, and creating content, like right now I'm recording this with the phone, okay? And if you want to record something on your computer, like you coding, you can download OBS Studio for free. So like there is no cost to producing content. There is no cost to putting yourself out there. But there is plenty of upside. So hopefully there's a lot of this advice is useful. I also highly recommend joining the devnursery.com Slack channel, so that way you guys can keep in touch with me. I'm pretty easily foundable there. You can just message me there, and I'm always glad to help and give advice. But with that, I bid you all adieu. It's been a great time, and for those who are watching this who weren't part of my recently finished class, hopefully you guys found this helpful as well. My name is Alex Merced. Have a great day and enjoy.